Sagittarius, and welcome to your Geoscope for the solar eclipse in Cancer, which happens on the 21st of June 2020. So this is a solar eclipse which will begin a fresh 6-month cycle for you, and it will be at the solstice. So in the northern hemisphere this will be summer. So it's quite a sort of a big deal, you know, kind of astrologically speaking, because it does set the tone, as I say, for the next 6 months until around about November, December, when, you know, you guys celebrate Sagittarius season and we head into the final set of eclipses for 2020. So I'm going to do this geomancy forecast because it helps us to drill down into some of the, you know, the details of how this eclipse, how these cosmic cycles are likely to impact you in the 3D. So, you know, can give us a little bit more gritty, practical information. But I will be doing some forecasts, some horoscopes for members of my website. So if you'd like to watch those as well, then just subscribe to my newsletter, which you'll find the details in the description box below. Right, so let's see. Let's cut the cards. Okay, interesting. So there may be overlaps with sort of for you in terms of one of the earlier readings that I did. It could have been Cancer, so you might want to just check that, particularly if you've got strong lunar placements or Cancer rising, or, you know, something of that ilk. But basically, you kind of starting out this particular eclipse having to deal with a feeling of limitation or restriction. Now, this could be, you know, the literal circumstances that many of us have found ourselves, you know, over the last 6 months, where movement's been restricted, travel's been restricted, and in many respects career options have also been restricted. So this is definitely you feeling that Saturn in Capricorn energy that was so prevalent in January, and which has been a feature of you know, the Cancer Capricorn axis of eclipses that have been happening for the last 18 months or so, as well as that Saturn-Pluto conjunction that we had in January. So I think this is kind of the energy that you're coming in with, but let's see where things are going. Right, so it does look as though you've had to kind of contend with, you know, shifts in your home or your family dynamics, particularly since the ingress of Saturn into Aquarius, because if you have a look at this card, you can see that it's ruled by Saturn in Aquarius. So it's interesting that this is Saturn in Capricorn and this is Saturn in Aquarius. And of course, Saturn went into Aquarius in March of this year, around about the equinox, and it's currently retrograde and will be returning to Capricorn briefly from about July until December. So this may also be pointing you to the 6 months or so that Saturn will be back in Capricorn for the final time. So this energy is a little bit heavy. It's often about kind of grief or loss or sorrow. So it's possible that you lost a loved one, you know, during the COVID-19 pandemic, but it's equally possible that you are just mourning the loss of a home, a feeling of belonging. Perhaps you feel as though it's time to sort of move on from wherever you are, but there's definitely a sense of sadness around where you live at the moment, or in relation to family, or something to do with an inheritance, or with something that's come down through the bloodline. So it could also be an ancestral memory that you are having to clear during this particular event, and it, you know, it could come up quite strongly when we have the lunar eclipse in Capricorn, which is the twin to this event, and that's in July, sort of early July. Gosh, so this is your 7th house of partnerships and committed relationships. So this is important or significant, ongoing and committed one-to-one relationships. Now, this doesn't have to be romantic. It could be in work related. It could be, you know, somebody that you are in business with, for example, you know, a business partner. but it's usually a long-term one-to-one relationship that's been sustained over many years, where there's a sense of obligation between the two of you, and sometimes there's a contract that governs your relationship, such as, for example, a manager of some kind, like a financial manager, a talent agent, that type of thing. But here again, there's a sense of a breakup or a sort of transience or a loss. This is Venus in Taurus, so this is earth energy, this is air energy, and a missio can often be about being separated or cut off or restricted from seeing loved ones. So again, maybe lockdown has also stopped you from seeing particular people that are important to you, but it can also have catalyzed certain breakups, in partnerships or relationships. Being cooped up with people can sometimes push pressure points, past breaking point. And so on some level, it looks as though you're either missing somebody, or you're kind of mourning the loss of a relationship that's come to the end of its life, that is no longer serving either of you. Yeah, quite heavy energy. Okay, and then in your 10th house, which is kind of soul, purpose, future, direction, career, that type of thing, we've got Albus. Now, Albus is usually a blank slate or a clean start in some ways. It has to do with purity, so it's the opposite to passion. So it's about detachment, and it can also, because it's Mercury in Gemini, can also have a sort of a kind of a cerebral sort of aspect to it. This is the element of air, so it isn't necessarily good with emotions, but it can be great if you are involved in a career that needs you to be a little bit detached in order to make decisions, and that also requires like a logical approach to things, a lot of mental faculties. So maybe it's something academic, but there certainly seems to be an emphasis on logic, detachment, and mental processes in your career at this time. So here are the keywords for Albus: whiteness, blank paper, paleness or fair skin, intellectual pursuits, wisdom, mental clarity, peace, a bright shining light, as well as coldness and detachment. Now, sometimes it can also talk about the sort of marble, the cold pallor of death, and if there has been some kind of grief or loss or suffering, then maybe you're one of these people that kind of channels it into your work so that it becomes something beautiful. You almost transmute the experience from something raw and gritty and messy into something that transcends that experience, but it kind of inspires others or brings wisdom. This is also the Hermit in many respects. This is very similar to the Hermit energy. So yes, on some level there seems to be you standing separate or apart from others, and perhaps standing head and above others in terms of your intellectual ability. So there's something there about a fresh start. But I'm just going to pause the video quickly while I do your geomantic conversions, and I'll be back in a minute. Hi Sag, welcome back to reading. So here are all the geomantic figures generated from the original four. I have popped them in the order of the Golden Dawn. So first, the cardinal houses, followed by the succedent and then the cadent. So let's just dive into this a little bit more. So for you, this particular eclipse is happening in your 8th house, and that's because if we think about your chart, we've got Sagittarius here, which means you've got Gemini here, which means that this is Cancer. So the Sun and the Moon will be in your 8th house, which is the house of shared possessions. Now, this can mean resources like money or assets or property that you co-own, perhaps with a partner, but it can also be intangible assets. So it can be things like sex, intimacy, trust, those kinds of issues. And of course, when it comes to those sorts of things, there's an obvious connection between 7th house partnerships and then 8th house shared resources. So, back in the day, this used to be, kind of mainly sort of the financial benefits of marriage, basically. Of course, these days things are a little bit more kind of complicated, one could say, or perhaps, you know, less sort of conventional. But nonetheless, if you are experiencing some kind of loss, or there is a divorce or a breakdown of a relationship of some kind, and there are legal matters involved, then it does look as though this will be resolved well. But you know, I think what I want to say here is that certainly as far as the eclipse is concerned, it's starting a new 6-month cycle for you in which you can benefit from working with others. So if, for example, you were born around about 1973, particularly towards the latter part of 1973, you probably have your north and south node in Aquarius and Leo. And for some people, you know, this might activate your sort of your 2nd and 8th houses, but you know, that depends very much on your chart. So anyway, all I'm saying is that if you do have a sort of an 8th house north node, then this is a great time to really sort of start working with others, collaborating, you know, doing joint projects, that kind of thing, because it looks as though they will be enormously successful. This is the Sun and Leo energy, Fortuna Major. So Leo season may also be important, and of course you are a fire sign, so it would make sense that you know, when the Sun is in Leo, another fellow fire sign, that, you know, energies would be really great, you know, for you to sort of thrive. So that may be important here. But I'm just going to read you the main keywords for Fortuna Major. So this is great fortune, good luck, serendipity or chance, power, effortless success, social mobility, a winning disposition, victory, inner strength, or natural charisma. So it can also be a case of, you know, social mobility as a result of pairing with like a power partner. So you could be a power couple that sort of is able to sort of really generate wealth together. You know, somehow the combination of your energy is greater than the sum of the parts, kind of thing. But the only thing is this Missio in the 7th house. So yes, you need to sort of get to the bottom of what this means. I mean, it could simply mean that you accept that the partnership may not last forever. Perhaps it's for a short amount of time. Maybe it's for, you know, the contract is sort of like temporary, in which case you've just got to kind of strike while the iron is hot. But nonetheless, you know, good fortune to be had here. So if you've got any lawsuits, divorce proceedings, if you are involved in court cases to do with tax, or just inheritances, maybe you've contested a will, it does look as though things will, you know, work in your favor. It can also be, you know, less tangible kinds of luck, as I say, where you sort of you benefit almost through helping others. You know, there's this kind of pay it forward kind of energy. Perhaps you have inadvertently paid it forward through loss in partnerships before. You know, maybe people stole from you, or there was fraud or cheating or something of that ilk, and now the universe is kind of paying you back almost. You're getting your just desserts, you know. So it looks really, really good for joint ventures of all kinds. And then the other thing to say is that I just want to see if that is, no, it's not reiterated elsewhere. But if we look at your other areas of relationship, we've got a Missio. Yes, I mean, we've got a Missio again twice. So as well as the 7th house, we've got it in the 2nd house and the 9th house. Now, the 2nd house is earned income and physical possessions. So linked with the 7th house, it could be to do with, as I say, divorce proceedings, or, you know, relationships splitting up and you having to divide up assets. But if so, you know, things are going to kind of work in your favor, even though maybe in the past you always kind of came out the loser. That is about to shift. I think the key thing is detachment. So maybe this is where Albus comes in, is not to sort of get hung up on material things, you know, to sort of let that flow, and in letting it flow and in not getting too attached to the whole kind of physical aspect of stuff, sometimes it works in our favor. You know, it means that we kind of inadvertently attract abundance to us. So, you know, that's a sort of an interesting irony of this kind of law of attraction, is not getting too attached to our desires, because that can often block good stuff from coming in. But then it's also in your ninth house. Now, the ninth house is very often our relationship with spirit. So, you know, the eighth house is this interesting juxtaposition between the seventh house and the ninth house. So, you know, it's kind of boundaries on two sides almost. It's your interface both with other people, but also with spirit. So, you know, maybe you've felt that you haven't been able to connect to your guides recently. Maybe there's been a lot of interference on some level. And you know this could be to do with you know the kind of shifts that are going on at the moment that require you to sort of up level, or you know move out of a sort of an area where there's a lot of electronic or magnetic interference possibly. But anyway, if so, again, you know, you stand to benefit from just small kind of shifts maybe in your perception, or doing some important kind of energy clearing work, and this might really help you to sort of open up again to your guides, and possibly to new guides too that may be coming in now. And then on a more positive note, we've got Laitisha repeated twice, which is happiness, joy, this kind of light feeling. So it's the complete opposite to this Tristia and, you know, Amisio. And here we've got you've got Laitisha in your third house and your sixth house. So interesting that I was saying about having this sort of light, detached attitude to whatever is going on in your life, because the third house is really about your perceptions, the way that you communicate, and you know, what you sort of put out through the throat chakra mainly. So keeping a sort of a light-hearted, positive view of things, seeing the upside, seeing the lessons, not letting things get you down for too long will keep your vibration high, I think. And that will be really important, you know, for, you know, creating this really positive energy, because we do have really positive energy as the outcome of your reading. So even though things may look really kind of tricky here, in the 3D world, there may be a lot of chaos, there may be sort of a sense of loss, transience, you know, the end of a cycle, things kind of breaking down. If you can maintain this sort of detached air from what's happening in the 3D, stay rooted in, you know, higher vibration, then I think what you'll realize is that it's because good stuff is coming in, you're making room for better stuff coming in. So yes, try to sort of maintain this sort of this lightness of spirit, this sort of unbearable lightness of being, because I think it will really aid you in this process. So Laitisha again repeated in the sixth house. Now this is everyday routines and schedules. It can also be work environments or work colleagues, as well as pets. So pets could be an enormous source of joy at the moment. It could also be that you decide to add something to your daily routine that is going to make you feel good, you know, a little bit of something for you, whether it's listening to music for 10 minutes every day, whether it's you know, having a lovely bath with nobody around and some lovely oils, or whether it's setting up a new routine in the mornings that helps you to cultivate your joy, to sort of really work on putting yourself in the right frame of mind to face the rest of the day, that it could be enormously beneficial, you know, for you in terms of productivity and just, you know, general kind of pep and ability to kind of get through the day. So, you know, that's something to say. But, you know, overall, we've got, I'm just trying to see if there's anything, any kind of karmic aspects. No, I don't see any here. Something I probably should mention is Via in your 12th house, which is potential kind of journeys of the mind. So imaginary journeys, shamanic journeying, that kind of thing. It might be a good way to sort of access wisdom and, you know, additional information at this time, you know, that will help you with this hermit energy. But your outcome is, I mean, we've got Acquisitio repeated twice, and Acquisitio is gain. This is really, this is the like reward or the fruits of your efforts, of past efforts. This is Jupiter in Sagittarius energy, so this is your sign, this is your planet. Really, really expansive, and you know, just as an aside, this is Jupiter in Pisces, these two. So this is the sort of emotional abundance that I was talking about, which then in turn attracts physical abundance. But yes, the outcome of your reading is extremely positive. So, so as I say, I do think that, you know, even though things in the 3D may not be looking so great, I think you need to keep the faith to sort of let go of what needs to leave, and stay detached from an emotional point of view, not getting too reactive to what's going on, And this will help you to sort of shift, to sort of up level, and with that some major gifts and rewards look like they're coming in. Abundance plus plus plus. So Acquisitio keywords are material success, profit, riches, gain at sort of attainable goals, expansion and absorption. So another way that this could also work, I'm just realizing this too, is a missio can sometimes be about what is unattainable. So you know how sometimes we can get sort of like hung up on a person who is emotionally unavailable, or we can get sort of hung up on perfection or a goal that we think, you know, once we have that, then our life will be fantastic. It could also be about that, about letting go of old goals, old dreams that you had that don't really fit where you're going now. So maybe this is also why that's we're getting this albus here, which is about a blank sheet of paper. So sort of starting fresh, realizing what goals or desires aren't really in alignment with your soul purpose anymore, with your happiness, and sort of shedding them, allowing them to go. That could be another way that this works. But somehow this gain seems to have something to do with your connection to the many, so other people in this sort of sense of the collective, because populace is the moon in Cancer, but in the sense of crowd. So this can be crowdfunding. It could be you know, having a relationship with the general public. So maybe you've decided to sort of put yourself out there and you know, go onto YouTube, or you're sort of using social media to connect more with your customers, that kind of thing, in which case, you know, it does look as though you'll get a lot of support if we look at Fortuna Minor in your 11th house, which is friends and social media and kind of groups. It could also be conventional wisdom, you know, telling you that sometimes, you know, the tried and tested way is the best. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. Just follow the sort of yellow brick road as it's already laid out, and all will kind of work out fine. And we've got populace repeated here in your 5th house. Now, 5th house is creativity, joy, self-expression, in the sense of making things, taking risks. You know, if you sort of thinking about starting out in a new joint venture, then this is about taking the plunge. It can also be about new relationships and children. So maybe you decide that your market for, you know, whatever this new venture goal is children, or, you know, educating young people, working with young people. So it does look as though that would be sort of a really good way to go. But it could, as I say, just be about working with a model of, you know, a sort of financial model that involves kind of mass uptake, as opposed to the sort of quality model where you have fewer clients or fewer sales, but a higher price range. This is sort of the opposite. So it's kind of like low price point, but a lot of people, a lot of demand, basically. So that's another way that this could work. Let me just read you the keywords for populace. So populace is people, crowds, community, meetings, assemblies, gatherings, public places, diversity, multiplicity, scattering and distribution. So again, it might also be working with somebody on a different distribution channel. It could also have something to do with sport, because that's another 5th house matter, as is the leisure industry and the arts. So all of those may be potential sources of gain at this time. But certainly, you know, from difficulties or kind of loss, there seems to be enormous gain. So I think it's a case of letting things break down if they're not sustainable, in order for new and better things to come in. And certainly working with other people does seem to be to your benefit, particularly if it's one other person. So I hope that's been helpful, Sag. Wishing you all the best for the upcoming solstice and new moon. I will be back with my forecast for the lunar eclipse in Capricorn, which is the twin to this one. So look out for that. And as I said, if you are interested in those horoscopes, then pop to my website and subscribe.